Okay, hi, my name is Karen A. I'm in Israel, and this is the Afro-Euro Reco12 podcast. Reco12 is a family of recovery resources that's got a bunch of shares from fellows suffering from all addictions, all afflictions, who have recovered using the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. On the Reco12 website, that's reco12.com, you might find people recovered in AA, NA, whether they're former drug addicts, workaholics, sexaholics, Al-Anons, codependents, hoarders, overspenders, compulsive overeaters, anorexics, bulimics, and you could throw in whatever other crazy thing you've come across or experienced yourself in there. Hopefully there's someone who has shared their experience, strength, and hope suffering from that very thing which you suffered from. You know, higher power is a funny way of working their magic, making sure that we fellows hear exactly what we need to hear. You know, just when I'm talking to my sponsee about something she went through with her mom, it's so relevant to me. She talks about something she dealt with her teen. It's exactly what I needed to hear, et cetera, et cetera. So you could check us out on reco12.com. While we're a more intimate meeting here on Zoom, you know, we get, up to 20 people. People listen to this recording every week, and there's a long shelf life. So, Josh, people listen, sometimes over 350 people a week, and the following is getting stronger. So this does make a difference. You do make a difference whether you're here, whether you're listening to us recorded. We welcome you, and we hope you gain some experience, strength, and hope, and take that light and recovery into your own life. If you'd like to contribute a seventh tradition, you could go to reco12.com/support and do that there. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce Josh B. Josh, you could let us know where you are as well. I'm not sure I even know that. And Josh is going to share with us about life after relapse. I know I'm intrigued, and I'm going to make sure I listen well and get my questions. Go ahead, Josh.
Thanks, Karen. Thank you very much for having me on the meeting. My name's Joshua B, and I'm a very grateful addict today, part of many different fellowships. I'm living in Spain today. I'm very grateful for that as well, you know. So, life after relapse. Life after relapse means for me that I am no longer being crushed by a self-imposed crisis. That self-imposed crisis made me relapse, self-imposed crisis, but today I'm very grateful to be here, not just to be here on this meeting, but I'm also very grateful to be alive, because this is the seriousness about this disease, is this illness, is that many of us pursue it to the gates of insanity or death, and unfortunately they're the terms. But so what have I got today? I've got a lot of acceptance in my life today, because I know that acceptance is the answer to all my problems. Normally, if I'm disturbed, it's because I find a person, a place, or a thing completely unacceptable to me at this moment in time, But one thing I've come to learn from doing this properly this time round, giving it my everything, making this a program a part of my living day-to-day life, is that nothing, absolutely nothing, happens in God's world by mistake, So knowing that, that lets me live life a little bit easier on life's terms, I have a lot more acceptance about the things that go on around me. Another beautiful gift that I've been given is I get to go to pause land when agitated, I get to stop today. I get to stop in my tracks and not react. I get to act instead. And that's all thanks to working a program, Today, I get to laugh. I get to smile. I get to have love in my heart instead of hatred in my head. Because that was my problem. I had a head full of hatred and I didn't know how to deal with it, So, I'm going to explain a little bit about myself and a little bit about my background. So, I grew up in an alcoholic family. That's not what made me an alcoholic or an addict, you know. Childhood was different. I felt different to everybody else. I felt separated from life instead of being a part of life, you know. I felt like I didn't belong. I felt like I was different to everybody else, you know. And also before I even started, I suffered from some things, and it explains it beautifully in the book on page 52. I'm going to flick to it. They're called the bedevilments, you know. We were having trouble with our personal relationships. We couldn't control our emotional natures. We were prey to misery and depression. We couldn't make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. We were unhappy. We couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. You know, that seemed to be me, even before I started using. That seemed to be me, you know. I struggled with relationships, especially with my family. I struggled making friends. Couldn't control my emotional natures. I was just one angry little child, you know. There was very few moments of pure joy because I was always disturbed. So that leads me on to what it is I actually suffer with. You know, I suffer from a threefold illness. I have an obsession of the mind, an allergy of the body, which makes me spiritually unwell. You know, but that obsession doesn't go to drink and drugs. You know, if I go deeper and if I really look at it, you know, thinking is my problem. I have an obsession over thinking. I can't stop thinking. And once I do start thinking, it just carries away with me. There's the allergy. I just can't stop. It takes me away, which then leads me to being very, very spiritually ill. And what happens when I overthink? Well, I'll use absolutely anything, anyone, and anywhere to change the way I feel. Not just substances, you know, relationships, social media, videos, yeah, YouTube, sugar, food, caffeine, the gym. Doesn't matter what it is. If it changes the way I feel, I will use it alcoholically, you know. So I had to admit that I was powerless over all of these things, powerless over my thinking, you know. What does admit mean? Admit means I need to confess a fact. Yeah, this is a fact of my life that I'm powerless over all of these things, you know. What it is exactly I'm powerless over, and what makes me powerless? The fact that no human aid, no half measures, no easier, softer ways, middle of the road solutions are going to help me stop doing what I'm doing, whether it's drugs, you know, clinging on to people, friends, codependency, whether it's abusing my emotions, living in self-pity. Yeah. None of these things are going to help me. Going to the doctor, getting a pill for the tablets, that's just putting, you know, fuel on the fire for me. That doesn't solve my problem. I've tried that, you know, and that was part of my relapse, was going to the doctors, being told to take medicine as prescribed, you know, and I wanted somebody to co-sign my bullshit. So I I phoned a few people. I says, what should I do? They went, yeah, just take them as prescribed. I went, yeah, okay. Knowing fine well that I could not do that, you know. So if when I honestly want to, I find I cannot quit entirely. Cannot quit entirely what? I cannot quit entirely using, you know, when I honestly want to. But furthermore, I cannot quit entirely thinking. That overthinking that goes on, that leads me to that first drink, that leads me to using that relationship, that leads me to using anything that changes the way I feel. I can't quit that, you know. I haven't had a better solution yet. So if I find that, then I may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience can conquer. You know, conquer is a big word. Conquer means take a place by force. Unfortunately, my disease took me by force. You know, my illness took me by force. My thinking holds me to ransom, you know, unless I have a solution for that that isn't just using and abusing anything and anyone to change the way I feel. So what does that suggest to me? That suggests to me that I need to find power. I need to find a power greater than myself to restore me to sanity, you know? When I hear people say restore me to sanity, that says to me that, you know, there's some sort of mental illness going on there. You know, there's something in the mind, which is quite funny because on page 23 it tells me that, therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic is in his mind rather than in his body, you know. So that says to me that that I am an outright mental defect, you know. It also tells me that in the book. So I need a few things then if I'm gonna try and start, you know, finding a power greater than myself. You know, I need willingness, I need honesty, and I need open-mindedness. These are the three essentials for me to get anything in recovery, you know. And the essential for me, not for me to be honest with other people, you know, first I need to learn how to be honest with myself, because I could never be honest with myself. I'd always lie to myself, and sometimes I didn't even realize I was lying to myself. Why? Because I lie to myself in my own voice, you know, which is very confusing, because I think, well, it's my own voice, it has to be true. Why would I lie to myself, you know? Why? Well, page 62 explains to me that I'm selfish and I'm self-centered. The world revolves around me because I'm driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity, you know? That means everything is about me. That's 400 forms of me that are blocking me from a power that I need, you know, to get over my alcoholism. Because every single day I woke up and the world has to revolve around me, me, you know? I need to surrender that. Every single morning, I need to surrender that. Because if I don't, I make decisions based on these things, which later leaves me in a position to be hurt, you know? I do things. I'm scared of things happening. I run my life in fear. I'm scared of things happening in my life, certain things, you know, whether it's friends leaving. So because I'm scared, I make decisions on this fear. I start acting a certain way, yeah? And I start acting in the ways where these people don't want to be around me anymore. So my fears end up coming true. Why? All driven by me, driven by my thinking, driven by my thoughts. Yeah, these ideas come in my head, but I've got to manipulate, lie, cheat, and steal for these to come true. You know? And that just leaves me twisted in the end. So I need to end up surrendering. I need to hand it over every morning. I need to find a God in my life, a God of my understanding. You know, even if I don't fully understand my God, which I don't need to today. You know, this is the thing. I'm not that important that I need to know everything that is going on in the world or in the universe, you know. So I hand it over every morning. Why? Because I found out that God is the principal and I am his agent, you know. Doing God's work, that is what is going to help me out on a day-to-day basis. But there's something that's been blocking me from doing this. And until I do the work properly, I don't know what this thing is that's been blocking me. Well, there's clear-cut directions in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous that help me find that out, you know. So after surrendering every morning, next, I need to launch out on a course of vigorous action, you know. The first step of which is a personal house cleaning. Personal to me, you know. I'm not figuring out what everybody else's problems here, you know, which I also like doing the first time I did this. Because I wouldn't behave if this person didn't do this, or I wouldn't do this if everybody would just step in line, you know. So I need to find out what it is exactly that makes me tick, what it is exactly that's been defeating me. And this personal house cleaning helps me do this. You know, somebody said to me once, it's like switching on the light and watching the cockroaches come out. And I found that to be very, very true, especially when I do it fearlessly and thoroughly, you know. I have to have the support of a power greater than myself through this, because I need a light shone on what it is exactly that's been defeating me. Self manifested in many different ways, you know. So I had to admit to God, to myself, and to another human being the exact nature of my wrongs. Nature meaning, why am I doing this stuff? What is it that's driving me to do this? You know, I've got certain things called character defects. I didn't even think I had any, you know. And it turns out the harder I do this, the more searching and fearless I am through doing this work, the more I realize that I'm absolutely riddled with character defects, and they don't just disappear overnight, you know. I have to live a life working through them, you know, turning my thoughts to God's will for me instead of running my life on self-will. So after I figure all this out, you know, I have to stop doing the things I want to do and start doing the things I don't want to do. This is what I need to do to get that spiritual experience, that psychic change that the book talks about, you know. I need to start changing the way I think. What is my thought life like today? You know, am I stuck in self, or am I trying to think and live on a spiritual ground? You know, I do realize that this for me is progress, not perfection. I'm never going to perfect this, but I'm going to aim every day to progress day from day, you know, doing a little bit better today than what I did yesterday, and the same tomorrow. Why? Because if I just live in my own will, you know, I'm going to stay sick. And not only am I going to stay sick, I will end up dying from this illness, you know. Or there's another alternative. I can live in God's will. I can get well and I can thrive, you know. I can thrive in life. I can live life happy, joyous and free. I heard that when I first came into recovery, and I didn't really understand what it meant. I thought, how can these people be happy, joyous and free? They're all lying. They're all liars. None of these people feel the way I feel. You know, there's no chance they could, or they wouldn't be feeling like that. You know, but then again, that was my lie, my mental lie that happens. You know, my thinking, this delusion that goes on. It is very, very achievable. You know, day to day, I get moments of happiness all through my day. I also get moments of sadness. You know, moments of being down, but that's okay. You know, because these are just moments. They pass. You know, I don't have such a thing as a bad day anymore. I just have bad moments in a day, you know, but I also have a solution where I can turn to a power greater than myself to help me through these moments, you know, have an acceptance that, you know, absolutely nothing happens in God's world by mistake. And actually, what I look at now as being something that's really bad, or I can't believe this is happening. You know, in a few months' time, I might look back, which I have done, and went, oh my, thank God that happened. I needed that to happen in order for me to grow. You know, growth for me happens in moments of pain, in moments of turmoil. You know, that's when I truly dig deep, and when I can learn and develop me as a spiritual being. You know, because that's what I am. I'm a spiritual being having a human experience, and unfortunately, human experiences do come with, you know, trials and tribulations, tough spots. But that's what this beautiful program has given me. It's given me the chance to be able to live through these things, you know. And by live, I mean live, not just survive, not just get by, you know, live and thrive. That's what I aim to do today. I need to make amends to humanity, you know. It's not just about individual people for me. For me, it's to humankind. You know, I was an absolute monster. I was a disgusting person because I was being driven by self, being driven by a selfish and a self-centered illness. You know, so I need to get up and make amends to humanity. You know, and it's tough. It doesn't matter how tough it is, because page 83 tells me, as God's people, we stand on our feet. We do not crawl before anybody. You know, why? I'm safe and protected by a power greater than myself today. Safe and protected by you know, safe and protected from what? Not from alcohol, not from drugs, not from people, not from place. Safe and protected from self, from my mind, from my thinking. You know, I need to repeat everything I've just explained. I need to do that every single day as I go through the day, as I go through life. You know, I need to look at my behavior constantly and see where I'm still being defeated, because I will still get defeated on a day-to-day basis, you know. That's when I turn to the power greater than myself. That's when I think, what is God's will for me today? You know, I achieve this. I deepen my connection. I achieve that through meditation. You know, prayers and meditation. First thing when I get up in the morning, you know, I hand it over. I ask God to remove me out of the way and direct my thinking. You know, on how I can be a better human being through the day. How I can not just be driven by self, driven by fear. Remove all that from me, you know?
Got questions about addiction, recovery, or just life in general? Let's noodle it out together. Grab your big book, a pen, a highlighter, and a notepad, and join Nikki M and me, Justin B, on Reco12 Noodle It Out with Nikki M. Each episode, we take real-life questions, ours, yours, and those from the recovery community, and dig deep into the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous to find real, practical solutions. So, if you're ready to do the work and apply the solution, tune in to Noodle It Out with Nikki M, streaming now on your favorite podcast platform.
Show me how you would have me be, not do, be, because if I'm okay on the inside, if my being is good, my actions, my doing are going to follow, you know, they will drop in naturally. Meditation's a really big one for me as well, you know. I've had to look at all different types of meditation. The one I use at the minute is transcendental meditation. But I had to go seeking for this. These things don't just come to me, you know. I have to go looking. I have to take action. I have to put the effort in. I can't be lazy or procrastinate, you know. I need to get up and have courage and faith that I'm being supported in the things that I'm doing on a day-to-day life, in the spiritual way of living that I'm striving for, that I'm looking for, you know. Praying for me is, I ask questions. And meditation is when the answers will come, you know, because I don't always know what's best for me. In fact, I hardly ever know what's best for me, you know. So I pray and ask, what is God's will for me? 9 times out of 10, if I come up with an idea and it's honest, it's pure, it's unselfish, and it's loving, if it's all 4 of those things, the chances are it's not my idea and it's God's will, you know, because normally my idea, there's manipulations in there, there's lying in there, there's self-centeredness, there's dishonesty. If my ideas have any of those in, even just one of those things, I'm running on self-will. So God's will is very, very important for me to know that I'm honest, pure, unselfish, and loving. So I also need to constructively review my day on a nighttime, you know, to see if I'm aligned with God, to see if my day's been aligned with God's will for me. You know, constructively is a huge word for me in that, because I'm very good at coming home, actually tearing myself to shreds, whipping myself, you know, and beating myself, rocking over my behaviours. But guess what? That is also self. That is also selfish and self-centered. That's self-pity to its highest form. You know, the reason it says constructively is because so I may go into the next day having learned from that behaviour, you know, having a bit of growth from what's going on, to be able to do better the day after, to do better each day as it comes, you know. Progression, not perfection for me. I need to enlarge on my spiritual life. These things help me. But what else will help me is page 87 tells me, be quick to see where spiritual people are right and make use of what they offer. You know, and I've been doing that. This is the beauty of what this program has given me, is I've been able to go and, you know, have spiritual experiences on a beach, you know, for the solstice. And it's beautiful things that I would have never have dreamed of doing, you know, watching the power flow in from the sea to the ground, being connected, being part of this energy in the world. It's absolutely amazing, you know. This is all from a little wannabe tearaway gangster from England, you know. Incredible that this is happening in my life today, and this is all thanks to this program. This is all thanks to somebody taking the time to take me through this work, to really point out to me what it is that's been truly defeating me, you know. When I relapsed, my mum had to sit on my bed and I nearly died. 4 days it took me. 4 days to get to that point where I'd used that many drugs that my heart was about to give up, you know. And now my mum can look at me and smile. She doesn't have to worry anymore. That is a beautiful gift. family, friends, loved ones don't have to worry, you know. I don't have to worry because I have faith, you know. I have courage and faith in a power greater than myself, you know. Which leads me to this last bit. As that person helped me, I need to help somebody else. You know, I need to help others or I will die. It's as simple as that. You know, page 97 tells me that helping others is the foundation stone to your recovery. You know, I get to keep this by giving it away, sharing my experience, strength and hope with other people, taking them through the work that somebody took me through. You know, the work to freedom, showing me a better way of life, showing me how to be a proper, decent human being instead of just a parasite to society, to my family, to my friends. You know, I'm very grateful that I've been given the gift of doing this. I'm very grateful to be here and I'm very grateful to be alive, you know. And I need to do this constantly. I can't just give it half measures after I've done this once. It tells me on page 317, following the principles laid out in the big book has not always been comfortable, nor will I claim perfection. But I have yet to find a place in the big book that says, now you have completed the steps, have a nice life. The program is a plan for a lifetime of daily living. There have been occasions with a temptation to slack off as one. I view each of these as a learning opportunity, you know. This is where reviewing my day comes in. And it doesn't say, you have now completed the steps, have a nice life, because I need to do these steps. I need to work these steps every single day of my life, from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to sleep. That is how I enlarge on my spiritual life. You know, that is how I become a better human being. And I just want to end it on this as well. Page 559. My problem is being stuck in thought life, you know. Thoughts without action is fantasizing. It mentions it on page 1 in Bill's story, and it mentions it on the last page as well, 559. And it says, above all, we reject fantasizing and accept reality. The more I drank, the more I fantasized everything. I imagined getting even for hurts and rejections. In my mind's eye, I played and replayed scenes in which I was plucked magically from the bar where I stood nursing a drink, was instantly exalted to some position of power and prestige. I lived in a dream world. AA led me gently from this fantasizing to embrace reality with open arms. And I found it beautiful, for at last I was at peace with myself and with others and with God. And I truly have found that peace. Thank you for letting me share. I'll leave it there.
Wow, Josh, thank you so much. Have a little bit of background noise here. I'm going to ask people to one by one unmute and ask their questions. Alternately, if you're too shy to do that, you can put your questions in the chat and we will take. I'm going to go ahead and ask the question. Josh, I want to hear more about your spiritual experience. When did you realize that this was this was the way for you, that the spiritual life was only one worth living?
So, for me, I've had a lot of spiritual experiences I've gone through sobriety, you know. The biggest one for me was when I relapsed. You know, that was a huge one for me. Not the relapse itself, but coming out of it. You know, it talks about in the book. Bill said that he had, you know, he saw a flash of a white light, and you know, and he experienced God in front of him in the hospital. For me, it wasn't like that, but you know, I was laid in that bed as I thought I was dying, and the past few months started flashing in front of me, you know, things that I'd done wrong, things that I hadn't done right, you know, things that could be improved on. And for me, that was huge, you know, that was a huge turning point. When I realised what it was that had truly been defeating me, you know, because I'd worked my program just based on alcohol and drugs, you know, but there was so much more. There was so many more symptoms to my illness, you know, to my disease that had been defeating me. So then once I started getting through the work again, you know, I was seeking different people. I was seeking different opportunities, different things that could help. You know, I went to see a shaman to see to see what that was about. And that was the most incredible experience of my life, just spending the day with this woman, you know, the energy that was flowing through everybody, the things she knew without knowing them, you know. I believe that God works through other people. You know, God works through all of us to give all of us a message of what we need to hear in that moment, you know. And like I said, there's been numerous different experiences, but I have to surrender every day. This is what the biggest spiritual experience I've had is being willing to search for these things, not having any prejudices in my mind, because I was flooded with them, you know, and just going to all religions, going to all people, going to all spiritual ways of living, and just taking little bits from each one, you know, and being open-minded to anything and everything that goes on in the world. You know, I went to a solstice ceremony. That was absolutely beautiful. You know, there was 9 people on a beach, and we were doing energy movements to gather the energy from the sun in the solstice. And then the next day, a turtle landed on the beach exactly where we had been and laid 99 eggs. You know, for me, these things aren't just coincidences; they're signs from above. And I wouldn't be able to do any of this if it wasn't through working the steps and living the steps, you know, not just working them and doing them and ticking the boxes like I did before, but actually living them on a day-to-day basis. That's what's really changed things for me. I hope that answered the question.
What I hear you say there is that, you know, the big book says, see where religious people are right. And it seems like you found that love and tolerance is your code. I'm hearing that also from the book. And that you were able to see where religious people were right. You were living on the broad highway, on the beach with 19 eggs, and you got a smile from above that you're on the right track. Whoever unmuted themselves, please go ahead and ask your question.
Hey Spearheads, if you're looking to dive deeper into the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous with people who live the solution, then you won't want to miss Reco12 Big Book Roundtable. Join David G., Nikki M., and me, the moderator Justin B., 3 recovered addicts from multiple fellowships, as we break down the big book line by line. In each 30-minute episode, we share our experience, strength, and hope in a real, raw, and practical roundtable discussion. So, if you are ready to learn and apply what you learn, tune in to Reco12 Big Book Roundtable on your favorite podcast platform.
Thanks. Hi, Josh. My name's Elaine. I'm a very grateful recovering alcoholic. Thanks for inviting me to this. And I wasn't really sure what to expect. And I put on my camera going, why is everyone being so rude with their cameras off? So apologies for that. And I love seeing people walk the walk and not just talk the talk, which I hear a lot of in the rooms. I'm obviously around the rooms a long time, but only 6 years, just gone 6 years sober. But I didn't get sober. My higher power got me sober. I'm very, very grateful for that, because I've been given, I suppose, my spiritual experiences, a lot of them have been, I don't even know, am I allowed to share, or am I just meant to ask you a question, Josh? Is it okay to share what I'm sharing? Yeah.
I'm not sure. Karen will answer that.
We try and do Q&A if you're gonna, kind of lasso it in at the end and bring it to a question. But the purpose is to do Q&A on what Josh shared.
Okay. So for me, the spiritual experiences have been the miracle of getting recovery on numerous occasions, which I think is similar to what you're saying, that you nearly died and your mum got to see her son happy, joyous and free again, which I think is beautiful. Yeah, all I want to say is it's great to hear the solution instead of the problem in the rooms. So thanks a million. I've never heard it explained so so easily to take in for somebody with ADHD as well as all the other stuff going on. Thanks, Josh. You're a gentleman.
Thanks, Elaine. God bless. Yeah, I mean, for me as well, it's like the spiritual experience and doesn't just happen for me, you know, it also happens for everybody that's around me, for everybody that I bump into on a day-to-day, you know, because they get to see the change, you know, they get to witness the change, they get to be a part of this journey. Not only that, but I'm also present now. You know, I can shower these people with presence, with my presence, instead of just being there, but not being there in my head, being distant, being away in la la land. You know, that's the difference for me today. I can show people love. I can show, you know, I can be there to support people instead of people just being around me in the same room, but I'm not actually there. I'm too busy wrapped up in my own issues and self. You know, it doesn't have to be that way. But I didn't think there was a way out of that, you know. And even if there was, I didn't think it would really work to the extent that it has, you know. So for me, that's the biggest spiritual experience, you know, is the psychic change and the way that affects everybody around me on a day-to-day basis.
Anyone else want to jump in? Anyone else have a question about taking the steps, about working with others, about doing service? Yeah, go for it, Nira.
Hi. It's Susan. I think Tan came on first. But I can go ahead.
Oh, yeah, that's so gracious of you. I just realized that after I said your name.
Yeah, Susan, I'm very happy to wait. So Susan can go first.
Hi, my name's Susan. I'm an alcoholic. Thank you, Nira, for your courtesy. I'm grateful for that. Josh, thank you so much for that share. I haven't heard you share since coming back after your relapse. But what I can see is the growth. Can you tell me what in particular you put your growth down to? If there's one thing that you're doing on a day-to-day basis, what is it in particular that's responsible for not only your spiritual growth, but also the growth that you share with other people, me included? Yeah, that's my question. And I just want to tell you that I'm very grateful for the help that you give me personally on a day-to-day basis. I'm not in a great place physically, and you do help me on such a great level, especially with my gratitude, and I know that you're very, very big on gratitude. So there's a lot of questions rolled up in that mash of words that have just come out. But hopefully there's one that you can make sense of and and answer. Thank you for your share.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. Yeah. So what has made the difference this time round? You know, no half measures. That's what has made the biggest difference. You know, this is a program for living, which means I need to live the program. You know, I can't shy away from anything in there. You know, I have to do everything, and I do everything on a daily basis. This is the biggest difference for me: is consistency. You know, consistency to do what it is I need to do. Doesn't matter if I'm tired. Doesn't matter if I've had a long night. Doesn't matter if, you know, it's been a long day at work. Because what I used to do was maybe I'd forget to pray one morning, and then the next morning I would say, well, I didn't do it yesterday. I'll get away with not doing it today. But then that would roll on to the next day. And before you know it, I'm not working a program anymore. But my mind will tell me I am working a program. My mind will lie to me. My mind will tell me that I'm fine, that everything's cool. And it really isn't. You know, then all my character defects come back in. and I don't realize they're there. So for me, that is the biggest difference this time round to last time round, is consistently working a program every day. You know, sending people my gratitude. My gratitude's important for me. Why? Because it's that psychic shift. It's that change in the way I'm thinking. I am the most, by nature, ungrateful person, you know, probably not on the planet, because there's a lot of people like me that suffer from alcoholism that are just ungrateful by nature. What I'm trying to say is that by seeing what I have in life, you know, everything that is still in my life, everything that I have to be grateful for, it takes the power out of the things that my mind will tell me that I don't have. You know, because I'll be quick to go into self-pity, go feeling sorry for myself. Gratitude stops that, nips it in the bud. I do that as soon as I wake up. Start the day on a positive. And yeah, consistency. But thank you very much for your question.
Hi, Josh. My name is Neva. Thank you for your share. There was just one question I wanted to ask, especially for, newly newcomers that are doing the program. I mean, I completely relate with you when you said, you know, when we, replace things with like the gym, the work, that may look like top lines, but there are also different forms of addictions if we do it obsessively. And but sort of substituting so-called bad addictions that are destructive to positive way of life, really helped me at the beginning, before I have that deeper connection with the higher power, because as you know, when you start, we don't know from truth or false or whether God exists or any of these things, just wanted to ask you as well, were there things that you included in your routine when you just couldn't see from next moment to the next moment, when you're deep in it and you're trying to come out when you're doing the program, certain top lines, as in like, for me, it was going to the gym and, until I could do, service, I attended a lot of meetings, things that you did personally to stay out of the head while the steps started to take effect.
Hey Reco12 Spearheads, if our recovery resources have helped you, please consider a donation. Your financial support, as well as your word of mouth support, keeps Reco12 running and reaching the man who is still sick. Donate today at reco12.com/support or check the show notes for PayPal and Venmo links. Every contribution helps carry the message. Thanks for being a Reco12 Spearhead.
Thank you, Nira. Yeah, great question. To begin with, I got it wrong. The first time round, I got it wrong. I was going to the gym. The gym is a great one for me, I was going to the gym, but I was using the gym alcoholically. I was pushing myself to levels of pain that were ridiculous, and I was doing this over and over and over again. I have a lot of injuries, and I was pushing myself to the point where I'd be in pain, I'd be laid in bed, I couldn't move very well, I couldn't get from A to B very well, The pain helped me get out of my head, So I was just using this just as another drug, another symptom of my illness, For me, this time round, I still go to the gym, but I listen. I listen to my body. I listen to what I need. I realize that, this vessel I'm using is just a vessel for me to carry out God's work today, So I need to be very careful of what I do, So I listen to it, because if I start damaging this even more than I have done over the years, I won't be able to do the things that I need to do for me to, stay abstinent from all those things that I use to escape, you know. Nature, walks in nature with my dog, huge part for me, because that is one place where I find the stillness is just surreal, you know. They're my most peaceful moments. But I also found this, you know, this my meditation, all of this. But for me, is helping others as well. As soon as I feel myself getting a little bit disturbed, I'll pick up the phone and I'll phone somebody. It could be somebody who's working a really good program, somebody who's really spiritually fit, and it doesn't matter. I just phone them and I say, "How are you? How's your day going?" You know, and as soon as they turn the question back onto me, I answer. I don't go into depth, and I turn it back on them. I make that phone call about the person that I'm on the phone to, you know, and that for me really helps as well, because it stops me with that self-thinking pattern, you know. It stops me, because in the past I'd have phoned somebody and I'd have asked them a question hoping they'll ask me about me, and then I'll make the whole conversation about me, you know. That's not how this stuff works, you know, because
I really
I'm
love
not
this.
giving...
I really love this, Josh. And you'll excuse me for interrupting you. It's really just out of excitement, but I want everybody to hear what Josh is saying about service and apply it to your spouse, your partner, your coworker, your children. You know, it's tricky, even though we know we're supposed to be there for our children. How much do I get needy about, you know, my teen only being with her friends, which I know is ridiculous in my head, but it's like, no, I'm here for them. You know, I'm here for them. So I want to make sure we're all translating this into all of our affairs, practicing these principles in all our affairs. This is a great hot tip, actionable, right? We talk about whether you're in step 4, giving over your step 5, or living in 10, 11, and 12. We talk about getting out of column 4 and into column 5, right? You want to be kind. You want to be grateful. You want to have faith. You want to, you know, have peace and ease, knowing that you're fully taken care of. Well, part of doing that is being able to care for others. Because if you know that you're in good hands, if you know that you're being cared for by all-powerful, loving power, then you could be there for other people. In fact, you've got endless power supply. You've got a major power generator there taking care of you. So you could just be the force, be the giver, you know, just trust, right? Isn't that right, Josh? Just trust.
Absolutely,
that, yeah,
100%.
And it could be like, I took my daughter for a massage yesterday, and there were 2 masseuses, and there was a younger one. And first I thought, like, I'll choose the younger one. And she's like, okay, Mom, I need to respect you. Like, you choose first. And I said, no, you like the AC. You choose first. You go in the inner room. It's colder. And you know what? Of course, my massage with the older woman was super experienced, was amazing. She did like hot stones and cupping and this and that. And it was like, I'll never go to another masseuse again. But it's like, we just have to trust, you know, even in mundane things like, you know, going for a massage with a daughter, you know, make it about them. Like, if I'm taking her out, make it about them, you know. And our disease wants us to just be selfish brats, you know. Why isn't it going my way? Why isn't my relationship, my family, my kids, my work looking the way I want it to look? Why am I not getting credit when other people are? We just make it about them. Sorry,
Exactly.
Josh, go ahead.
It's cool. But I love the fact of what you just said, you know, the thinking. You're on about the thinking, I want this and I want that. But then we took the opposite action. And for me, this is what the blessings of having column 4 and 5 written down in front of me are, you know, is it's my thinking that's wrong. So as soon as I have a thought that's in column 4, a thought of one of my character defects, yeah, I take the opposite action. And that's what ends up giving me that psychic change. You know, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, take action, take action, take action. It's no good changing my action once I've done the wrong action, you know, because that wrong action means I've been in that thought for a long time. You know, so as soon as that thought comes in the column 4, I take immediate action in column 5, and that kills out that stinking thinking, as they like to call it. You know,
and what else I'm hearing here from the big book, the other thing I'm hearing what you're saying from the big book is, when all else fails, working with others, or if you want to just call that service, will save the day. Obviously, the big book is referring to sponsoring, taking people through the steps, doing service at meetings and fellowship. But, you know, I'm working with a really wonderful sponsee lately, and she talks about self and social situations and having agitation about that. And I said, The only way for an addict to get out of that is just what Josh said. You know, if I go to a wedding and I'm thinking about that I've put on a few kilo, or who's giving me attention, or do I look good, or does everyone have a prettier dress than me? As an addict, we do not have that dubious luxury. We have smashed the delusion that we are like other people. When I go to a wedding and I sit at a table, I turn to the woman next to me and say, can I put some cherry tomatoes on your plate? Would you like a baguette? Can I pour you some Diet Coke? That is my job. That we were fired from our old job. It did not work out so well. We didn't even get, you know, what do you call it? You know, damages or, you know, 401k, whatever you call it. We call it pizzuim here in Israel. You know, you didn't even get any kickbacks for when you got fired. You just got, you know, laid off with nothing to show for it. This is our new job, to be of maximum service, to work with others, to be there for other people. And it could be as simple as, like Josh said, picking up the phone and saying, someone and saying, how are you? In fact, just last week, you know, I was at a retreat that was for single mothers, and 2 women who are widowed weren't there. And I said, you know what? This is my program today. I need to call them and say that I missed them. They were missing. Their presence, their vibe, their energy was really missing. Check plus. That is service. You know, you don't have to knock yourself out. You don't have to stack chairs necessarily. Yeah, you just be of others. Go ahead, Josh. Get back on there.
No, absolutely. You know, this for me is all about that psychic change, the altruistic thinking, the selfless thinking. You know, it mentions it in the big book. And that doesn't have to be, when it comes to saying helping others, you know, it's the foundation stone of your recovery. It tells me that in the book. But that doesn't mean I have to help others that are in recovery. It means just helping humanity as a whole, you know, and being altruistic with it, whether that's been knocking on the neighbour's door and saying, do you need anything? You know, it doesn't matter what it is.
I tell my sponsees to start doing washing up for a change if you're living with your parents who's providing you a free home.
No,
And if
absolutely.
you're a parent, sure, you can wash the floor. That's service. You know, my floor was dirty and I was feeling resentful and I couldn't sleep. I was like, wait a minute, say your prayers, get a bucket and get some floor cleaner. And I was like, this is great service. You know, like everybody can serve higher power much better when it's clean and smells fresh and crisp from the Ajax, and put a little bit of bleach in there to get out the grime. And it's just like, and I was thinking, you know, clean house, trust God, serve others, like literally. You know, clean out a drawer, clean out one drawer.
Yeah, and I did this at my mum's, and you know what? This was another part of the spirituality for me as well, is in the meditation, was when I was staying at my mum's after I relapsed. You know, I was getting up every morning, I was doing my routine, but then I was going out into the garden and I'd be planting plants for her and doing all this, but I was doing it all of this for her. You know, I wasn't doing it for myself to gain anything, but from that I was gaining such peace of mind, because doing all that is a form of meditation. I'm clearing my mind and I'm just focusing on what's going on in front of me in that moment, you know, and I'm not being drowned out by self and by thought. So that in itself is you know, helping others is a beautiful thing, you know. By doing that, by doing something altruistically, I gain so much in return, but not wanting to gain anything.
I love that too, because plants give off oxygen. That's also service. And making sure the world gets more oxygen, more O2. Okay, let's take some other questions, and then we could take those and end. And if we don't have any, I'm just going to ask Josh to go ahead and pray us out, okay?
Hi, this is Rifki. I just wanted to come in and say thank you so much, Josh. This was just amazing. I just loved hearing everything what you have to say, and it just speaks to me so profoundly that, you know, that it's just broadening my horizon to see, you know, what it means actually to be giving. And I always thought it's like, you know, I need to be giving service with sponsorship and that's it. And I'm done. But it's really, you know, it's becoming a better person and being of service, you know, to God and to his people. And it's just, it's beautiful. I love everything what I'm hearing here today. And I'm just so grateful for this program and for the willingness today to be willing to work this program, because it really works if I work it. So thank you so much.
All right, Josh, I'm going to ask you to pray us out. With that, I want to thank you for your beautiful, honest, vulnerable share. Thank you for being of service. Thank you for all that you do. I put my number in the chat. If anyone would like to share on this Afro-Euro Reco12 podcast, we want you. Thank you, everyone, and have a beautiful day. Light and love. Go ahead, Josh. Pray us out.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you for letting me be of service. And I've chosen the prayer of St. Francis because it is, for me, what the whole programme is about, coming out of column 4 and going into column 5, my will versus God's will. Lord, make me a channel of thy peace, that where there is hatred, I may bring love, that where there is wrong, I may bring the spirit of forgiveness, that where there is discord, I may bring harmony, that where there is error, I may bring truth, that where there is doubt, I may bring faith, that where there is despair, I may bring hope, that where there are shadows, I may bring light, that where there is sadness, I may bring joy. Lord, grant that I may seek rather to comfort than to be comforted, to understand than to be understood, to love than to be loved. For it is by self-forgetting that one finds. It is by forgiving that one is forgiven. It is by dying that one awakens to eternal life. Amen.